If you're not bothering anybody back there.
No. All right. I would like to welcome everyone to the January 23rd meeting of CCWD. Would you please rise and join me in the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Rebecca, would you please call the roll?
Director Davidson?
Here.
Director Riderman?
Here.
President Thomas?
I am here.
And Director Cicada and Member Hill are both absent.
Okay. All right, we're, item number 2 is public comment. At this time, members of the public may address the board on non-agendized items. The public is encouraged to work through staff to place items on the agenda for board consideration. And of course, no action can be taken on matters not listed on the agenda. Comments are limited to 3 minutes per person. Do we have anyone here that wishes to make any public comment? Yes, sir. Come forward to the microphone and give us your name.
Hello, my name is Leonard Pristia. Oh, thank you. My name is Leonard Pristia. I live at 1664 Sandalwood Drive in Murphy's, and my house butts up next to your Forest Meadows storage facility where your reclaimed water goes from your wastewater treatment plant. And we've had some issues with that pond, and I've tried to go through your operational folks, and they've been very nice people, but we haven't been able to resolve some of the issues because of some policy decisions with the organization. We have found that the organization mostly says, not our pond, not our problem, and I appreciate your opinion, but we disagree with that opinion. And I did send a letter to your general manager in July asking for a response and asking for some issues, possibly reconsidering the policy. Unfortunately, you've gone through some GMs, and so I felt that better just to go ahead and step it up to the board of directors. And I'm just requesting a response to my letter. I did bring a copy of the letter for the board members and an extra one for the general manager. I'm going through quite a few of them.
Okay, Leonard, thank you very much. We will take this. This will be something we just give to our operations manager. General manager, Jeff. General manager. Okay. All right. Thanks for your comments.
Thank you.
Any other public comments here this morning? All right. Going on to item number 3, the consent agenda. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. Items will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. However, any board member may request that an item be removed for later discussion. We have items 3A, approval of the minutes of the board meeting of December 5th. Item 3B, ratify the claim summary of the number 562, the secretarial fund, in the amount of $1,709,583.47 for December of 2018. And then we have item C3, the information quarterly projects report by Charles Palmer. I would entertain a motion.
I move for acceptance. Second.
Okay, moved in second. Rebecca, would you call the roll, please?
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Riderman?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes, that item is approved. Going on to item number 4, new business. We have 4A. This is discussion and direction of the fiscal year 2018-19 second quarter investment report. We'll be hearing from Jeffrey Meyer.
Gather all my things because I think I have the next 3 items.
Good for you.
Do you have 2 hats, though?
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. The first item before you, item 4A, is our quarterly investment report. This is something we bring to your board each and every quarter. We're reporting on the second quarter of our fiscal year, which is set October 1st through December 31st. As you can see on page 1, there's very little change in our cash position. Part of that is because we've had funds going out equaling cash coming in. There's not a whole lot that goes on in the fourth quarter. Our big expenditures are in the first quarter, which is our debt service payments. Our cash inflows happen in the third quarter, which is property tax revenues. So the second quarter is rather negligible as far as activity is concerned. If you turn to the top of page 2, we've added something new to the report, and this is a listing of the different financial transactions that occurred during this period. On November 8th, we transferred $500,000 from LAIF to our Umpqua checking account. LAIF is where we park our funds with the state treasurer's office. It's doing rather well these days on, excuse me, interest rates closing at the quarter end at 2.32%. December 17th, we transferred $37,000 from our Wells Fargo money market account into Umpqua. Wells Fargo is our trustee for our bonds and CDs, so they hold those. When there's any earnings that are posted to our account, it goes there, and then we shift them over to Umpqua. And then on the 19th of December, we moved from Umpqua into LAIF $400,000. There's not a whole lot of action on the Fed scene in the second quarter. The Feds did raise their rates to 2.25%, or from 2.25% to 2.5%, but most of the markets had already built in that increase. There was a lot of instability and wild swings in the equity markets. Stock market went up and down, dropped significantly on Christmas Eve, came back up a little bit, but the reaction to that, the response to that was a flight to safety. Whenever the stock market goes down, investors pull their money out and go to something that's safe, which is U.S. Treasuries. This ends up driving the price of Treasuries up and the effective yields down. In this particular case, yields dropped from about a high of 310 down into the 270s. Why is this important? Not so much on our investment side, but as you know, we're working on PERS loan, and that 10-year Treasury is generally one of the benchmarks for loans, and now it's down to about 275, which will be beneficial to us as we go to secure that loan. So that's the best part about that whole process. At this point, I'm opening it up for questions.
I'll make a motion to accept the report. Is that all? Is that what you want?
I have no questions. I'll second the,
Okay, we have a motion and a second for acceptance. Would you please call the roll?
Want to have public comment? Ask for it.
Of course, yeah. Any public comment on this item? Okay, now may we call the roll?
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Reddiman?
yes.
President Thomas?
Yes. Okay, going on to 4B, the discussion action adopting district financial management policy. Also Jeff Meyer.
Yes, Mr. President. The item before you is a result of staff looking at our auditing policy, and I want to direct you to the first section on the agenda item, the staff report. Our current policy, 5.001.1.6, basically says the district will employ an independent accounting firm to perform an annual audit of the district's financial statements. The completed and accepted audit shall be available to all required and interested parties. After reviewing that, we found that to be insufficient. So we took it upon ourselves to draft a policy. We solicited input from the Finance Committee in October, took a draft back to the Finance Committee in November. They made some comments. and it went back to the Finance Committee on January 15th. They approved the draft policy and recommended that staff bring it to your board for approval, in addition to rescinding the existing policy 5.001.1.6. The policy that you will be adopting is behind the resolution, and the existing policy is the back page that you will see, and it's been highlighted into the existing auditing policy, the one single section there within the entire financial reporting management policies.
Okay, Jeff, I have a question here. The policy that, verbiage that you are replacing, just independent counsel, the highlighted section on page 2 of 14, that's the one you're proposing to put in? It's
No,
like-
we're actually proposing to rescind that. And
Rescind
delete
it.
that in its
Okay.
entirety. I apologize.
All right.
And to replace, and just to leave that blank, and we'll go through and renumber, we propose a brand-new policy, Financial Management Policy 5.13, which is a page prior to that, which is a financial audit policy.
Okay, all right.
So, you know, as a member of the finance committee, I've seen this a couple times, say, we're taking this out completely,
Okay.
throwing it away so there won't be a .6, or .7 become .6, and then this is all brand new.
Okay,
It goes into quite detail on the selection process, how long an auditor can perform its duties within the district. There was nothing addressing that in the prior audit selection process, and I think it'll definitely meet the needs of the district.
We'll make the motion adopting the resolution for the new financial management policy.
Second it.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, motion passes. Okay, now we have, the next item is 4C, discussion and action regarding fiscal year 2018-19 mid-year budget review and budget adjustments, and this is also Jeff Meyer.
This budget review will also include a request for a budget adjustment. That's in regards to, or in response to suggestions from our auditors, and I'll get into that later. The other thing we're going to do is kind of explain where we are here at the midterm, some of the proposed changes that fall within the authority of the general manager that we want to inform your board of what we're trying to accomplish. And I'll try to make this as short as possible. I know finances and numbers can be quite boring to some people. Others, well, we're just an odd duck. Okay, we're going to go over some of the budget assumptions within the 18-19 budget. Talk about the different revenues, the year-end. We're going to talk about year-end revenue projection and expenditure projections, the proposed budget adjustment, look at our CIP budget for this year, and finally kick off next year's budget process. As you remember, back in April, May, and June of last year, we not only went through a budget process, we went through a rate hearing. And the district adopted a 5-year financial analysis as part of the rate plan. We looked at how we were going to manage our finances over those 5 years. We looked at funding gaps in the water and sewer side. We identified cuts and expenditures to reduce that funding gap. And we also reduced revenues in years 1 and 3 as a result of using a level rate model, because we didn't want to see such high, your board didn't want to see such high increases in the first couple of years. However, that did require additional expenditure cuts and program reductions. We did add principal payment for the admin building loan starting this year. Years prior, it just was interest only, so this is the first year of 5 years worth of principal payments. And we also added a sewer loan repayment program, which the sewer loan owed the water fund, the sewer fund owed the water fund a little over $700,000. So we started a program starting this year of repayment. Those amounts were identified in prior year audits, and as of the end of the fiscal year 2017, it was approximately $770,000. That has since grown to close to $1 million. So this loan repayment program is going to be extended out for a number of years, and we will keep track of that as we go forward. Finally, we've continued to rely on reserves, specifically the Special Project Fund and Interest Fund 108 to pay for capital outlay purchases. And we transferred $370,000 from the Special Project Fund into the operating budget. In looking at the budget, with the increase in rates, operating revenues the budget went up about 4.4%, so about the same, 4.3 in water, 4.6 in sewer. There was a significant increase in property tax revenues based on county projections. They projected a 12.5% increase. We did have to decrease New Hogan Power revenues projections by $52,000 because most of New Hogan is based on rainwater for its inflows, and the revenue stream at New Hogan goes up and down based on rainfall. All in all, revenues were projected to go up $834,000 or 5.3%. Our revenues are augmented by transfers in, money we bring in to help fund expenses in the operating fund. As I mentioned, capital outlay, $370,000 was transferred in. We also record salaries and benefits for all our employees in the operating budget, but some of their time is spent on capital R&R projects and CIP projects. We then show within the budget that we transfer in a like amount for the amount of time they spend on those projects to help offset the costs of our operating budget, because the time they spend on these projects can be charged to those projects. Finally, under debt service, we transfer in money for our Umpqua loan, that's a capital R&R loans, comes from the water and sewer capital R&R funds. We also bring in from the water capital R&R fund a little over $100,000 to pay for the USDA bond that was associated with the Reach 3A project. And we transfer in $75,000 of interest income in Fund 108 to pay for the interest on the admin building loan. In December, your board amended the 2018-19 budget by adopting the customer assistance program and funding it with a transfer from Fund 108 into the operating fund. You also increased expenditures in admin services to pay for the assistance program, $30,000. It was a net zero effect, but it did reduce the special project fund balance. Here is the budget for 18-19. A little over close to $16.5 million in revenue. Nothing really jumps out at me on this particular budget other than the fact that we did have an increase in revenues and on water and sewer, and that was directly related to the rates. We did see an increase in investment income, and that goes along the lines of what I talked about on the quarterly investment report, specifically much higher yields in LAIF and other investment instruments. On the expenditure side, $19,174,000. This number includes the additional $30,000 for the customer assistance program, $600,000 more than last year. Salaries and benefits went up nearly $500,000. Part of our funding gap reduction program was to cut services and supplies. We did so by nearly $350,000, and we cut capital outlay. And here's a summary by department. Our capital outlay budget included 3 replacement trucks, a replacement van, a snow ATV, 1 hydro excavator for $300,000, some PRV volts and copper handheld water meter readers, and an antenna replacement, which is the replacement for the antenna that connects us to the county. One of the things I'm going to be coming back to is $300,000 for the hydro excavator. And here's a summary of our debt service. My apologies, I developed a head cold over the weekend. There's 2 loans that came off the books last year, and that was the BBVA refinancing loan for the 2004 debt that we had, and also the VACON truck. So we're down to the capital R&R loan, the Series 2016, that's the USDA bond for Reach 3A. Bureau of Reclamation note, we're getting down on that. Per side fund loan, that matures in April, I believe, and now we're starting to pay down the principal of the headquarters loan. So if you go to page number 11, this shows us fiscal year 18-19, where we stand year to date, and this is just operating, and we stand at a little over 42% of budget. The reason it's under 50% is we don't receive property tax revenues until January, February, or in May, and then supplementary in August. So when you see that 2.6 million of your budget doesn't even start flowing in until after the mid-year, obviously your revenues to date are going to be lower than 50%. We did receive revenues just last Friday, and they came in just slightly above projection. But I did not include them in this report because report is as of December 31st.
And that revenue source was the property tax?
It's a combination of property taxes and improvement district assessments,
Okay.
which are very specific in how they can be used. We're pretty much on track with our water and wastewater rate revenues. Investment income's a little bit higher than we anticipated. And we're a little bit low when you go down on transfers in, on time spent on capital R&R projects and CIP projects. Actually, those two, I apologize, those 2 numbers, when you see the transfers in, the 196, 383 for as of December 31st and the 28, those should be up above in the next line above. There's really nothing at this point for carryover funds. That was a typo on my part. But we're still below where we need to be on the amount of time staff spends on R&R projects, and we're going to address that a little bit later on. As I mentioned, it looks like we're on our sales of water and sewer rate revenues. We're pretty much on target. Tax revenues, when I did this, we're going to be on target. We may get maybe an extra $90,000, which will help the water side, but not necessarily the sewer side. Investment incomes is higher than anticipated. So overall, non-operating revenues are going to be about $23,000 over budget. Total revenues are projected to be about $78,000 over budget. And the majority of that comes from property tax, a little bit of property tax revenues, but really our rate revenues and our other operating revenues. Transferred in are going to be estimated to be $61,000 below estimate. Again, This is time that is charged to R&R projects and CIP projects. The challenge we have is staff being able to work on those projects and still manage their other duties. On the expenditure slide, on slide 13, we're expecting to be a little under $61,000 over budget. A lot of this has to do with what has been going on in the utilities department. There's a number of regulatory studies that we needed to complete that were not included in the budget. Plus, we did some White Pines Lake clearing that was unanticipated and was a significant cost. And again, I'll address that in some of our budget reallocation or repurposing. Here it is by department. As usual, Board of Directors leads in being under budget.
We could work on that.
Pardon me?
We could work on that.
We're going to try. We're seeing if we can shift some of the costs to your budget to make it look in line with everybody else's.
But we just have to start spending.
Yeah.
Now, the utility one is, services is a little misleading because what we plan on doing there is repurposing some of the money. So if I'm looking at that less than 34,000, under 34,000, I've already taken into account that we're not going to spend the entire amount in the capital outlay budget. But I did not show the actual increase in services and supplies. So that's something that I want to address later, and Damon is here as well to talk about it. So some key expenditures, salary and benefits are projected to be $43,000 under budget. We had a vacancy for several months that helped assist us in that. And actually, we've had several vacancies. Overtime expenditures are estimated to be $26,000 over. We've had a number of repairs work after hours, but we're also going to be proposing a backlog leak repair program that's going to impact our overtime hours, but it will significantly reduce the backlog of leak repairs or number of leaks in the Jenny Lynn and Copper area. Service and supplies are estimated to be $198,000 over budget. Most of that is associated with some regulatory requirements on the sewer side, some reports and monitoring that we've had to do that wasn't anticipated or in the budget, plus the White Pines Lake cleaning project, which was about $60,000 to $70,000, where we took out the toolies and cleaned up the shoreline. And capital outlay is projected to be $95,000 under budget. So all in all, if we take a look at the little bit higher revenues, lower than anticipated transfers in, and greater expenditures, just a year-end projection, and this is a projection, we're going to be $44,000 under budget. If we look at those amounts, that varies when we go month to month, and when we look at projections with property taxes. Some of those are going to be coming in a little bit higher. We have some costs that are going to be coming up that we're going to need to address. There are some costs associated with the customer assistance program that were not in the budget that we're going to need to address, and some other costs that we're facing here. But I think all in all, at year end, we'll be right on target. So some of the key issues that came out of this review, unfortunately, sewer revenues are not going to be great enough to cover our costs again this year. So we're going to, remember, we slowly increase those over time, so we're still going to have to be borrowing from the water fund to balance that out. Property tax projections are going to help out the water fund, but not so much on the sewer fund because of the allocation. One of the things I want to bring to light is we have 3 water improvement districts and 3 sewer improvement districts. Those funds are specifically allocated to those those dollars are specifically allocated to those funds. They can't be cross-mingled. So that just leaves our general CCWD property taxes that we can allocate. And unfortunately, that isn't enough to help backfill the sewer fund. We're trying to work our way through this with a little higher rates. This is the first year of higher rates, so we'll see where we stand at year end. On the expenditure side, the regulatory studies that I talked about, approximately $69,000 in costs. The White Pines cleanup effort was $60,000, and the weekend water leak repair program that utilities wants to implement is going to cost us an additional $20,000 to $30,000 in overtime. And I'm going to have Damon come up and talk about that in just a moment. But we've sat down and done a lot of homework on this to make sure that we can attack the backlog of 50 to 60 leaks that are just kind of persist. And Damon and his staff are on board with this. The other thing I wanted to bring up was why we have to do a budget adjustment. As you're aware, we pay federal and state and other permitting costs on our two hydroelectric programs, the North Fork and the New Hogan. We do get reimbursed for those by NCPA and Modesto Irrigation, MID. Our past practice is to record the expense, and then when the reimbursement comes, net it against it, so it's a net zero on our expense. Our auditors would prefer us to show the reimbursements come in as a revenue, the total expense be listed below. It still nets out at zero, but this is for transparency, and that we record all revenues and all expenses. So the budget adjustment that I'm asking you to adopt today budgets for all the expenses that we have coming out associated with the North Fork project in New Hogan, and it's in the range of $721,000, but also add $721,000 in revenue, again, a net zero impact on the budget.
I need to ask you a question on that. Are you saying that the expense associated with the licensing, we pay it, and then we get reimbursed whatever that is? If it's $200,000, send them a bill and they'll reimburse it, and that's separate from the power generation revenue?
That is correct.
Okay.
And we will actually have a separate account for those revenues, so they won't be commingled on the power generation.
Okay.
Do both of those happen in the same fiscal year? The expense and then the reimbursement?
Yes, they do.
And how far apart are they?
Generally, within 2 to 3 months, they're very good about reimbursing us.
Okay, thanks.
On the capital outlay side, the utilities has determined that the hydro excavator is really not the way to go as far as their needs. It's more for pumping out the septic systems and such. They really could use another VACON. And so in just going through this process, we don't have enough money to buy a VACON. They're $450,000, $500,000 a piece. Plus, we have a couple of them that are going to have to be taken off the road or used minimally because of the new Air Resource Board requirements for large diesel emissions, large diesel truck emissions. So what they want to do is repurpose some of these funds, and as you can see, the list: West Point monitoring well, Wallace monitoring well, Arnold sewer capacity study, mini excavator, skid steer excavator, and the backlog water pipeline leak repair program. And I put down below, right below this, are one of our sections in the budget policy that allow the general manager to transfer between budgeted activities and departments within a fund. I actually have the authority to do this, but I wanted to bring this to your board so you're fully aware of this and are in concurrence with what our program is. Now remember, Damon didn't start until after the budget was adopted. So he's coming in with a fresh set of eyes, seeing what he needs to get his work done, especially when we deal with multiple service areas trying to get work done and hit the backlog of repairs. So at this point, I'd like to have Damon come up and kind of address what these items are and what his challenges are.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, directors. So really briefly, just to kind of reiterate what Jeff said, the 300K for a pumper truck is really not going to meet the needs currently of the district when it comes to repair. What we really need is an additional vac-on. The capacity study for Arnold Sewer, the West Point monitoring well, and the Wallace upgradient monitoring well are all regulatory requirements that stare us in the eye, that weren't there, where we had no funds allocated for this fiscal year. So in order to meet the regulatory requirements associated with West Point, which that monitoring well requirement is as a result of the 2017 discharges due to the heavy storm events, we're going to need to find some funds to implement and repair the existing monitoring well system. So this is a good way to reallocate some funds that we had that didn't necessarily meet the overall objective when it comes to leak repair and fund some regulatory requirements that are staring us in the face. Additionally, we only have 2 mini excavators, and one of those is utilized by the construction crew, and it's kept in Vallecito, and that creates issues between our copper crew and our Arnold crew when work needs to be done. So oftentimes we can find crews at odds and both need to get a mini excavator into a constricted site to create, in effect, a repair, and that we don't have the infrastructure to do so, the material or equipment to do so. So parsing out this 300 grand would allow us then to get a mini excavator and a skid steer, which we could deploy just to Copperopolis, and that would allow the distribution crew there to react more quickly to leaks and affect repairs more quickly, and then we can repurpose the backhoe there and send that to West Point, which we currently don't have a backhoe or a mini excavator or any sort of repair equipment associated with sewer or water distribution system leaks. And then what we can do with the additional cash is really focus that towards pipeline repair and leak repair. So that would be my wish, is to be able to repurpose the 300K for the pumper truck to address a multitude of needs that I recognize that not necessarily all of them were funded for this fiscal.
Any questions?
No?
I have a couple of questions, Damon.
Yeah.
On this nomenclature here, and I know what a mini excavator is, but the skid steer excavator, is it something in a Bobcat that you're going to be able to put a backhoe attachment on it?
Just call it a skid steer.
Skid steer?
Just be a skid steer with a Bobcat where we could put multi-attachments on it, yes.
Okay.
And so we do have a multitude of attachments up in Arnold. I'm not sure as to how many, but quite a bit. We can share those between the crews as well. So it allows some flexibility in that regard also.
So that's what a skid steer costs these days?
Listen, none of that stuff's cheap.
Holy cow. Amazing. And also on nomenclature, the hydro excavator, I always thought that was synonymous with a vac-on. That's not, or it is?
Well, from what I understand, this piece of equipment was only designed to address the water side of repair. And what we really need is a vac-on that will address both water repair and wastewater repair. 8-inch hose, the flexible pressure washing hose, and multi-attachments. From what I understand, that this quote did not have all of the attachments that would meet all the needs for the district in terms of water and wastewater. So it was really sort of geared towards addressing water issues only. And I think for the district, the best interest would be to purchase equipment that we can use on both sides of the house.
Okay,
I have a couple questions.
go ahead.
What is the time frame that you're anticipating for the VAC-on? It seems like a logical solution would be to take the $300,000 and apply it towards the VAC-on that you think we might need eventually anyway. What is the?
Well, what I would like to discuss with Jeff and with the board in the future is looking at different ways to address the need for a VAC-on that might not necessarily, require the complete overall purchase right at the gate. There's effective ways to lease to own VACONs, which don't, for a short term, which don't necessarily require the district to put forward $300K right out of the gate. Perhaps it's a $100,000 annual payment for 4 years and we get a new VACON. Because of the fact that, currently we have some regulatory requirements that need to be funded. And so I see this as an opportunity to meet those needs and at the same time step back, take a look at how we plan to fund the purchase of a VACON and see if this is the best, if cash on the barrelhead is the best avenue, great, but perhaps there's another option.
And what is the time frame of that VACON?
Well, it's gonna be, I would say at least 4 months to make the purchase and to anticipate seeing any sort of vehicle on site.
And that's still within our budget period,
I
right?
was gonna try to push the button here, but obviously you heard what happened. I believe it was in November that we came to your board with a discussion of the large diesel trucks and the new Air Resource Board emission standards. And one of the things that we are working on right now with utilities is an inventory of all our large vehicles, in addition to our needs analysis and how we're going to address those over time and replace not only the VACONs, but our large diesel trucks. We've got dump trucks, we have a number of large vehicles that we have to do. And once that's in place, we hope to have that done this spring so that as we address the fiscal 19-20 budget, you will have already looked and approved the program and how we're going to implement that over the next 4 to 5 years.
Okay. My last question is regarding the regulatory issues on those three, the West Point Walls and Arnold areas. Is there a specific time frame within which that those must be addressed?
There is, we should have had the West Point monitoring well work completed already. However, the state has not pushed the issue with the district. The Wallace upgraded monitoring well is more to address the discovery or the understanding of what the constituents in the down gradient wells are. We really have no baseline, and as we potentially see those numbers such as nitrates start to increase in the down gradient wells, we don't have a baseline to tell the state, hey, it's because we have an up gradient well that has high nitrates, or vice versa. So that's going to help us facilitate a conversation moving forward about potential regulatory requirements in the future. So that one, not yet. And then in Arnold, we're really close to capacity. So we anticipate as more heavier storms come or the potential for another 2017 comes around the corner that we could exceed our allowable monthly discharge capacity. So that's more of the future also. So the only one that's really staring us in the face right now would be West Point.
Okay, and I also wanted to comment that Jeff, I do agree that you could have done these changes and manipulations, if you will, or rebudgeting, refocusing the budget on one item to another. And I do think it's a great idea to bring it in front of the public and to the board in doing this, so it doesn't look like so it looks better. Thank you.
All right, thanks, y'all.
Questions?
Thanks, Damon.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, this is an action item.
Actually, I'm going to plow through the others. There's more.
There's more?
More?
Oh,
We need to take a half-hour break. Go ahead.
we're getting down there.
Okay.
The other item, which I'm going to bring Charles up to talk about, is the fact that, as I mentioned, we're a little bit behind budget in charging staff time to projects. Generally, it's engineers and inspectors. Part of that issue is that engineering has 2 engineers, and I think we discussed this previously. You have Charles as district engineer and a senior civil engineer in Bob, who's looking at a lot of the sewer side, regulatory, and is providing significant support to operations side on the regulatory side. What we've been looking at and talking about for quite some time is the need to add one more engineer whose time can be charged to R&R projects, specifically looking at the water side, water distribution, the tank management program, and so forth. So in this, I'd like to bring Charles up to be able to discuss this, and you can ask questions of him. But this is something that we've identified, and I've had talks with the previous GM for probably the last year, year and a half, to keep us moving along, specifically on the water side.
Good afternoon. So Jeff asked me to put together a few bullet items kind of to explain the reasons that an additional engineering position would be beneficial to the district. And, you know, from my perspective over the last few years, the issue is, you know, we have new programs that we would like to implement. You know, those include work that crosses between the different departments, such as the GIS and mapping, the meter reading programs, you know, the asset management effort, and all that hinges a lot on development of some GIS and related database information, and you know, which I would like to bring to the engineering committee this next month to give a little presentation on that. But it's very technical, and we have to develop in-house talent. I know Sam Singh, our engineering tech, is making some good progress forward on that, and I would like to continue to encourage it. So, and having another engineer would, you know, allow more time to be dedicated to those kind of programs that we need for the future of this agency. And then also, there's issues with capital projects. We have a backlog of capital projects. You know, myself and Bob are doing our best to cover the bases there, and you know, just things come up that are unexpected, and my time or Bob's time has to be put on those because you know, they're urgent and pressing, and often related to regulatory issues. And yeah, and then there's you know, also the tank management program that we need to move forward on. A lot of the tanks, you know, that's probably easily a full-time job for a couple of years, just getting our tank program up and going and continuing on a regular basis. And so Jeff, did you have any other items?
At this point, we're not asking your board to authorize the position. I'm just at this point letting you know that if there's concurrence, we will come back at a future meeting to authorize the addition of the position. The majority of the funding will come from R&R funds and some grant funds. And if we do this, the recruitment process will probably take us out to May before we can hire. But this is something that we find is critically necessary, especially on the water side. As Charles said, tank management program. We've had a few tank replacements out there. We've been applied for and hope to get some FEMA money for our redwood tank replacement. That time, if the person comes on board, he or she can charge their time to that program as well.
I always like to see, you know, kind of a well, definitely hiring from within, or promoting from within. Where is Sam in his development or process, or in his career to get licensed?
Yeah, that is a possible solution, and you know, there is a series of there's a state agency that certifies engineers, so you know, he has to go through the exam process, and so there's two exams. There's a fundamental of engineering exam, which is basically the initial exam that you have to pass in order to start having qualifying experience to sit for the PE exam. So, and that it's about I think it's 3 years of experience, documented full-time experience after you pass the fundamental engineering exam.
And more importantly, is he interested?
I believe he's interested, and he's definitely a talented individual. So, you know, I would just like for his own career development to be able to offer him that kind of position eventually.
No, it seemed like the institutional knowledge that he would already have and getting up to speed on projects and ongoing, things that the district is already involved in would be so much greater if we can make that happen, but
Right, right.
depends on him a lot, I think, or most.
Right, and I think he's headed down that career path. It's just, I think it's a matter of time.
Okay.
So, and I did want to mention one other thing, is just also an additional engineering position. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little bit stretched and, I want to be able to have more engineering committee meetings to, developers are starting to knock on our door more with, since the economy took a little bit of an uptick and, our standards are out of date too. So just there's a lot lot to cover and, I just feel that an additional engineering position, when Jeff feels it's the right time to budget for it, there's several reasons that it could be justified. So.
But you don't want to take Damon's $300,000 to do that. It's not that
Well,
simple.
we actually have, right now, we have a good funding source in the R&R program. And, I know that the Reach One project and the Tech Eye project coming up this summer are gonna use a lot of the water funds. And, we're probably still struggling a little bit with our R&R sewer funds, but, we still don't have quite the resources we need to really move that program forward, I think, as it was originally envisioned, so.
Considering the painful experience we've had with the identification and care and feeding of the Indian artifacts in Jenny Lynn, maybe we should have an engineer who also can do Indian work, so.
Yeah, it's.
No comment.
No comment, okay, I would advise the best course of action is to say no comment. Thank you.
Good. Point well taken. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thanks, Charles.
So that particular item will probably come back sometime in February. And Charles is going to be coming to your engineering committee in February, talking about the GIS system, which Sam is taking the lead on, and some of the asset management programs we're looking at. And we can delve into this a little bit further. Okay.
Have we set a date for that engineering committee meeting? 5th? Okay.
Not that I'm aware. We can look into that, but I believe it's the first Tuesday.
So is that February 5th?
That's right. Okay.
Okay. I'm not going to go into the CIP projects because we've talked about them at length. So I just want to go in and stop at this point before I go into next year's budget kickoff and see if there's any questions or comments or direction you'd like to be able to provide in this area. Once this presentation is done, I will ask your board to approve the resolution to amend the budget.
Okay. Once this presentation is done and you're completed now?
For this current year budget.
Oh, okay. All right.
That's why I wanted to ask, see if there's any questions on this.
Okay. No, I
have
don't
no
have any.
further questions.
No further questions. Go ahead. My seat. There we go.
Okay. Next year, well, it starts now. Some of our challenges, which are not new, we're still going to be challenged to have enough sewer revenues, both rate revenues and other revenues, to cover our expenses. That's going to be an issue that's going to move forward for the next 3 or 4 years till our rate study kicks in with the higher revenues and rates in years 4 and 5. We have state mandated water conservation requirements that are coming down the road. And there's a new state mandated lockoff procedures that's going to be implemented towards the end in the spring of 2020. So these are some of the challenges we're gonna have to look for. Capital outlay, as Damon was talking, we're gonna come to your board with a vehicle replacement program, especially taking into account the large diesel trucks. And we talked about the R&R program. One of the things we do as part of the program, or part of this budget process, is to get some guidance from your board as we move forward through this process on your goal, priorities and goals and operations and maintenance, CIP capital improvement. What we'd like to do is bring forward to your board a number of items. Charles is going to revisit the 5-year CIP program. We're going to look at vehicle replacement. Damon's working on operational needs. So we're going to be bringing these to your board as we move forward through this springtime so that your board can absorb all that and help us set direction and goals on how we implement the next budget. And I would actually like to try to prepare maybe a 2 to 3 year business plan on some of these programs, because GIS, asset management, is going to take several years to implement. So I want to be able to have buy-in, and we're going to be able to work those into future, not only this coming year's budget, but future budgets. Departments, as usual, are going to submit their budget requests to finance. I'm going to be reviewing them. Staff, any changes in staffing level will have to obviously go to the GM before it comes to your board. I draft the budget, review and revise it with the GM. It goes to the finance committee for review and comments. Then we're going to present the preliminary budget to your board either May 29th or June 8th. I have a wedding to attend on June 12th, I'm sorry, my mind's already gone to June 8th. I have a wedding to attend on June 8th. I'm giving away my daughter in Montana. So it'll all depend upon how I can get this budget done around that wedding date. And
No pressure.
none. Budget workshop on June 20th, and your board will adopt the budget on June 26th. And that's my presentation. Any questions?
This is, I just want to bring up something that I haven't heard mentioned in months and months, but when we talk about these capital improvement projects, I hope that we don't lose sight of that slurry line. I know there were impediments about right-of-way, signing off on right-of-way and everything, and I just have this idea in my mind that the slurry line might have some additional benefits that we hadn't thought about before, not only water supply, but for fire protection along that route. I mean, if you have gradient, you could conceivably fill a 3,000 gallon tank on the way down, and you'd have a wharf hydrant or something, so water tenders could fill up along that ridge or ridges that pipeline comes down. You know, that what a unique possibility that would be, and I think that there'd be fire-safe funding and that kind of stuff that would help with that. So.
We will take that into consideration, and that's a future topic for the engineering committee.
Yep, okay.
What are we planning in, PG&E is gonna operate differently. They've already shut, some areas down. What are we gonna do to plan for that? Have we thought about what's gonna happen if they begin to shut the system down when there's high fire danger? And will it affect us?
We do have a system of backup generators to our pumps and pump stations and lift stations and our plants, so I think we're in pretty good shape for that. Daniel, do you have any other thoughts?
I know we've purchased a lot of generators years back, but I don't know how, it's still gonna be kind of an open question as to what they're gonna do and when, but
Right,
but we
yeah.
need to be ready for it.
Yep, yeah, absolutely right. So we do, like Jeff said, we do have quite a bit of standby generators on site for most of the facilities. I haven't yet been able to determine if there are critical facilities in certain neighborhoods that don't have a standby generator and would need a trailer mounted, and if so, how many trailer mounted do we have? So it's something that I'm digging into because it's a very valid question and we need to be prepared for, because it's just not a 1 day, 2 day, you know, as you know, when they go shut it down, then they have to go check every single line before they determine that everything's all okay before they can turn it back on. So I'm in the midst of working on an assessment, and then we can move from there, but for the most part, the district is pretty well set on standby generators.
Okay, well, I'd just like to see some sort of report on that.
Okay, yep, no problem.
Okay.
Now, you need a motion to amend the fiscal 18-19?
Yes, we do.
I'll make that motion.
Budget adjustment 19.04.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second to make those adjustments. Do we have any public comment on this item? Hearing none, would you take the roll, please?
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Rutledge?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, going on to item number 4D, we have an update on the grants program, and welcome, Joel.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the board. Per request from the board some months ago, I'm going to provide a 10-year overview of our grants program and a little bit about our current projects and moving forward. So for the 10-year overview, we brought in $13 million in grant funding since 2009. And you can look at that in detail with the handout that you all have and it was in your agenda packet with a project-by-project list. We're going to touch on a few of those major projects shortly. That required $6 million in matching funds or loan components. And so we were able to achieve $19 million worth of projects on the CIP. One of the keys over the past 10 years was targeting disadvantaged communities, because a lot of the granting agencies are prioritizing those communities for grants, in many cases that were 0% matching funds. And we were very successful, especially in the West Point area, in earning those grants. And I would just remind the board, and I will always remind the board of this, and I've learned this as I have gotten more involved in grants, they are not free. It is not free money, and they are not necessarily easy to apply for, implement, and then maintain. So I just want to encourage the board to always keep that in the back of your mind when you ask staff to pursue grants. We certainly want to pursue them where possible, and they're a great option to leverage our dollars. But just as an example, one of the grants that we put forth is the Redwood Tanks Replacement Project. This binder is what goes to Cal OES and FEMA, and you can see that's a pretty thick binder. And inside of that, there's a lot of technical work from engineering, a lot of narrative from me and Charles, and the whole team has to come together in order to put a good application together. And then once we get it, if we do, that's just the beginning. We have a lot of work from there on out. Some of these grants require reporting for 10 years or more. To remind you of who we mainly look to for grants, we look to Cal OES and FEMA, been very successful with them. USDA, which is generally more of a grant loan component. The State Revolving Fund, Department of Water Resources. There are a lot of other smaller granting agencies, but our largest grants have come from this list. This is the handout and the attachment that you have. So I'm going to hit the highlights of these. If you do have any questions about these individual projects that had a grant component, certainly willing to answer those as well. So this is what we've achieved in the past 10 years. This includes grants that are finished and also ones that are in process. And then this is the list of grant applications that have currently been submitted. We have not heard back one way or the other. The update on the West Point Wilseyville wastewater treatment plant consolidation project is that we are still trying to meet the funding requirements on the sewer side. And the board will remember during the rate hearings, One of the benefits of having higher rates on sewer is that we would be bringing in more revenue, and that would help our standing with their financial requirements. So we recently submitted our audit to the State Revolving Fund for review, and we're hoping that if not now, within the next year or two, we'll meet those financial requirements and we would qualify for that consolidation project grant money. And that, we're hoping would be a 0% match, which is huge.
You know, that is a huge grant, and that's been on my mind. I was gonna be asking about that today at some point anyway. So the ball's in their court right now, and what is the timeline on that?
So we recently received our audit that was finalized, and that's been submitted to their financial team, and they're reviewing it. But it does look as though we may still be not quite up to the threshold that we need. Part of that is because when we approved the sewer rates, we did the smoothing effect. Instead of having a really big increase in the beginning to get us where we needed to be, we spread it out over a number of years, and so that changed the numbers a little bit. So still stays tuned on that. We'll bring an update as soon as we hear a final answer from the State Revolving Fund on that. On the Ebbets Pass Redwood Tanks replacement, that's this grant here. We have submitted that. Cal OES gave us some positive feedback on that application, but it's in FEMA's court right now, and so we have not heard back from FEMA. We're hoping to hear back from them soon. We do know that they have some issues with government shutdown and also the federal government's opinion on California and wildfire mitigation in general, so that may be what the delay is there. So let me give you some highlights of what we've done over the past 10 years. This is the West Point Clearwell Storage Tank and Pipeline project. So that blue tank on the bottom left is one of 2 clear wells we replaced in West Point, and the little picture of the lighter blue tank is what used to be there. And that was a steel perimeter with kind of a floating top on it, which was not a very good system. So huge improvement there. And then on the bottom right is the new Bomberville water storage tank. And you can see, I don't know if it shows well in this, but there's a redwood tank that used to be there and a fire burned right all the way around that. So we very nearly lost that tank. Here's the Vallecito Douglas Flat wastewater treatment plant. $4.4 million, zero match. And here's the board of directors at the time with, I believe, June Lopez is there celebrating the opening of that new plant. Here we have $1.47 million up in West Point, replacing a lot of pipeline. We had phase A and we had phase B here. So that was from our treatment plant all the way down to downtown West Point, and much of the distribution lines in downtown West Point were replaced. We did have a small match on phase B of this. Here's Big Trees Village Redwood Tanks replacement. So this is replacing a few redwood tanks with new glass-lined metal tanks with 75+ year lifespan, and really very difficult for fire to cause any damage to these. And this is a really neat photo because you can see what was there before and then what we're replacing it with. And so that's what we're trying to do with this next grant, is do more of this. And then Reach Through 8 project, we all remember that, up in Arnold, right downtown. A lot of logistical challenges there, but we pulled that off and did it well. And that's a huge upgrade to our system, and the board celebrated that not that long ago. And then here's the Jenny Lind pretreatment facility, which is currently in progress. I would note to the board that we recently applied for additional funds from FEMA, and we did receive almost $600,000 of additional funds for this project. So really amazing grant funding here with a minimal match. And this is due to the Butte Fire degrading water quality coming down the Calaveras River watershed into Hogan, and then releasing out of Hogan to where our intake is. So this is going to give us one more layer of protection to give that water more cleaning before it hits our current plant. I did want to also speak to the regional grant programs. These aren't CCWD alone. This is a larger group. So we do have the T-STAN and the MAC. And so we have UMRA and Tuolumne Stanislaus, IRWM. So just to let the board know what projects are on the books right now. With the T-STAN, we're currently working on a recycled water Douglas Flat Water Distribution Project. The idea there is that we would use recycled water from our Douglas Flat plant and provide it to an agricultural customer and put that to beneficial use. And then we also have a automated meter reading project for Ebbets Pass that has been proposed and has been added to the list, but has not been funded at this time. So if a funding source does become available, we could pursue that and see if it scores high enough to move forward. But right now, there's not a funding source for the AMR. Coming over to the MAP, we have a $4 million Sheep Ranch water treatment distribution project. Again, that's just been submitted. No funding source for that right now, but we do need to do some serious work up in Sheep Ranch. We currently do not have a disadvantaged community status for Sheep Ranch. We need to get an income survey to have enough respondents to get that threshold and get it certified by a third party. And that's been something that's been hard to do because people don't want to respond to those surveys up there. And so if we were able to get that, that would help us qualify for disadvantaged grant funding. We also have a West Point automated meter reading project that we've submitted. We have money in the budget for that. We're going to be moving forward with that. But if we were able to get a grant, we could augment those funds. We have a West Point water treatment plant drinking water compliance project. That would be to add a second filter up in West Point, so we have a better redundant water supply up there. And then we have the Wilson Dam meadow restoration and habitat project. And this would be looking at studying maybe the removal of Wilson Dam and creating a meadow up there and getting some money for that. So again, all of these projects have been submitted but do not have funding, and so we'll need to continue looking for funding sources for these. The bad news about the IRWM process is that the current funding out there for these type of projects is under $12 million, and that's not just for ours, it's up and down the entire Mountain Counties region. So there's very, very few funds for a lot of very worthy projects. And so we need to find a way to either pursue these grants from another means, or we need to see more money flow into the IRWM process. Now, Prop 68, which just passed last year, did put a lot of money forth for park-related projects and things of that nature, but those funds don't really directly translate to the projects that are highest on our priority list. And so the IRWM process is a little bit stalled out right now because of a lack of funding. I did want to highlight the UMRA.
Joel, with that said, is there projects that are further down on our priority list that would pair with the funding that is available, the parks projects in Prop 68?
There are projects that we could pursue. The thing is that as Jeff and I talk about grants and our priority list, it's hard to stray too far from our CIP because we only have so many staff members and so much time. And as I explained, every grant takes a huge amount of time. And so to get away from the CIP, which we absolutely have to do for our core mission, that may be something that we would really think hard about. And I know right now the direction is we really want to focus on let's leverage the capital R&R dollars and try to get grants that are right in line with the board's top priorities. Now we can work with other organizations like UMRA, who I'll talk about right now, to take the lead on some of these other projects, for example, forest management, and we can play a supporting role without being the lead on that and still accomplish great things. And we're seeing that happen with UMRA with their Pumpkin Hollow project and other forest management projects. And as we heard from Mia last meeting during the federal legislative strategy, looking for ways to have more arrangements like what UMRA has with the Forest Service is something that we could support and we could work toward back in DC.
Thanks.
So UMRA definitely does have forest management as a priority. They entered into a master stewardship agreement with the U.S. Forest Service a few years ago, and they're the lead on this work. So this was a project developed by the ACCG, and it's called the Hemlock Project. It's looking to treat more than 14,000 acres. And there are 6 areas that they're looking to treat. I'm going to show you a map here. So this is kind of up along Highway 4 to the north of Highway 4 for the most part. And these are different phases of the project. So right now the Pumpkin Hollow project is in progress. That's a $1.1 million project. And it's doing fuel breaks and thinning. And I'm hoping we can get up there and take a closer look at this when the weather improves to really see what's going on, maybe get the board members to see what's going on, and then take more pictures and video of that and get it out into the community and show this is an amazing partnership, look what it's doing, and look at the benefits to the watershed and for fire protection. And so this is something that I want to make a high priority, is to get up there and do a better job of telling that story, because I don't think most people really know that this is going on.
And whose land is it? Is U.S. Forest Service?
Forest Service land. And then another segment is the Cabbage Patch Restoration Project. So that's a $1.2 million grant, and that hasn't started yet, but it should be getting going fairly soon. And that's about 1,100 acres. And then the next phase that we're hoping is going to be funded is the Black Springs Restoration Project. That would be almost $2 million, and that would be same deal, thinning the forest, masticating, clearing, and treating the forest to where it would be a much more healthy environment. And so those are very exciting. I think those forest thinning projects is the best example really in our whole region of how we can have partnerships come together and work on something that benefits all of us, for fire and water quality. And so we're hoping to see more of that. And that's something that I think that we can work on with MIA and UMRA. Maybe expand what UMRA's doing, or maybe look over to T-Stand and see if they want to get involved. But certainly the UMRA model is working very well right now. So I would just close with, when we look at grants, we just have to be cautious, again, about staff time. We have to be cautious about what exactly the grant requirements are. So if there's a large loan component, we already have debt service issues. And so we want to make sure that we are very careful to take on any more debt. We may want to avoid those things. Better to have a grant and loan forgiveness. And if we do have a match, we're fortunate to have the capital R&R funds in place. And so we have a good funding source to pay our match, but we want to try to keep those down to 25% is much better than having to do 75% match for a 25% grant. So we want to, again, focus on the approved 5-year R&R CIP and be cautious in what grants we apply for and not try to overextend ourselves. And so that's where we are on the grant program right now. Does the board have any questions on this program?
I just had one question about the Wilson, the proposal to remove that dam and get some money to do the meadow restoration. I got the impression that Mr. McGreevy was suggesting that his group could do that grant application. So did you hear him say that? Or?
I know he had volunteered his time to work on that, and we are in contact with him. Okay. And if he's willing to do that grant application and push it through, we would be more than willing to bring that to the board for discussion and maybe take that route as opposed to staff taking the lead on that. Certainly want to work with him if we can.
Okay. All right. This is an information item only. Is there any member of the public that need to ask a question here? Okay. If not, thank you. Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Thanks, Joel.
Anybody interested in taking a 5-minute break?
Sure.
Okay. I would like to just take a break before we launch into the next item of business on the adoption of the West Point Master Plan. So we'll be back here in about 5 minutes. Meeting back to order, please. We are under old business, item 5A, discussion and action regarding adoption of the West Point Master Plan. Peter Martin. Thank you, Peter.
Good afternoon, President Thomas, board members. I'm going to try to summarize this as best I can. As you know, you've got a lengthy presentation at the November 14th board meeting on this item for the draft plan. Basically, I just wanted to highlight the purpose of this plan. It's to evaluate the capacity of water supply sources, the Bear Creek, Middle Fork, and the McCallum River, our existing water supply sources, the constraints on the West Point water system facilities, and prioritize and advance the improvements outlined in the 2004 and 2005 West Point Water Master Plan documents. So essentially this plan was focused on identifying necessary improvements for water supply reliability and treatability in the near term, and prioritize projects to facilitate necessary improvements. Essentially what you had was a master plan that had a lot of things that was kind of like a long wish list of things to do, but none of those had actually been prioritized. And so the former general manager had identified this study as one of those that was of importance to try to set up some sort of priority for those projects going forward so they can be eventually potentially integrated into this capital improvement program. So this evaluation mostly was focused on raw water supply sources, conveyance systems, storage facilities, and treatment facilities, and then also your treated water distribution system. Those are your storage, pumping, diversions, and pipelines. So those different projects from that prior plan were sort of evaluated based upon a series of factors. Those are mostly focused on water supply benefits, the cost of the supply, source water quality improvements, regulatory requirements, and project sort of priorities. So those priorities were kind of in a ranking system that were included. As you can see, you've got a series of improvements on the Middle Fork of the McCallum River, existing intake there, some of the improvements to the regulating reservoir, and I think I actually listed some of those. So the highest priority, most immediately needed projects were included were the construction of a new Middle Fork and McCallum River intake system. As you remember, that current intake and pump station was flooded in the most recent high water year storms, 2016 and 17. The replacement of the existing pump station and also the water supply pipeline. There's constraints on that pipeline that don't allow the district to provide maximum daily demand right now, and potentially additional fire flows in an emergency scenario. So that was one that was identified in those prior plans as a constraint on the system. It's mostly sizing a pipeline and some other things in between there. So the other one was the construction of a new West Point regulating reservoir floating screened outlet. This was more focused on water quality issues, allowing the treatment operators to select where they would draw water from in the column.
What's the name of that reservoir now?
It's still the regulating reservoir. If you want to change it, you're welcome to do so. Excuse me.
Put out a
The West
contest.
Point regulating reservoir staff gauge and Bear Creek discharge meter, those were completed. They became a higher priority with the implementation of Senate Bill 88 and the requirements for reporting under water rights. We have completed the installation of gauges that are live and routinely monitoring the diversions at Bear Creek and also into the regulating reservoir. So, and then Joel kind of mentioned earlier the redundant West Point water treatment plant capacity improvements. Those are focused, mainly on an additional filter. And then the Bummerville water distribution improvements were the ones that were selected as high priority. In this plan, you kind of have sort of a potential timeline for some of the initial planning stages for these projects, should you choose to go forward with them at some point in the future. As you notice, the Bummerville water distribution improvements project did have some preliminary design and planning and permitting that was done as part of the 2005 master plan update. That project has not been implemented, but some of those, that's why you have a construction sort of season with no planning or additional planning or permitting. So as far as the medium-term improvements, there was some really preliminary design and options for the potential expansion of the off-stream regulating reservoir. This was identified as more of a water quality improvement, not a water quantity improvement. You have a shallow reservoir that has, from time to time, had issues with taste and odor. So the consultant looked at options that could potentially allow for an expansion and try to remain within the existing footprint of that existing reservoir. And then lastly, the removal of Wilson Dam and the meadow restoration up above that dam was identified as a sort of a medium-term project, again, beginning at any point. But essentially, through the modeling, it showed that either expanding Wilson Dam or the existing Wilson Dam provides no added benefit in the driest water years. So therefore, that project was recommended to eventually go towards a decommissioning of that dam and potentially a restoration of site with the participation of Sierra Pacific Industries. Wilson Dam, as I mentioned, one of the reasons why is it's expensive to rehabilitate. The initial design, it was sort of a fill-in-place dam built, constructed in the 30s or 40s. There's no seepage cutoff for that dam. So in order to rehabilitate it would be quite expensive for not a lot of water supply benefit. So recommending decommissioning of that dam and doing meadow restoration up above. As I mentioned, there's a couple options for essentially expanding the regulating reservoir, potentially, essentially excavating instead of, trying to raise a dam, some other things like that. There's a lot that has to be considered with that, but this is just one of potential options there. There's costs that were figured as part of that, and those were not included as your priority projects, but they were listed as a medium and long-term project. So I just want to highlight that a letter was received from the Foothill Conservancy and the Calaveras Planning Commission yesterday evening or afternoon. I don't know that everything in that letter needs to be responded to, but you did actually receive a copy of that letter. I just kind of wanted to address some of the points in that letter, though, in the meantime. The 2018 Supplemental West Point Water System Master Plan Update is a feasibility study performed by the district to analyze water supply reliability in its West Point service area. It is on the agenda today for adoption by your board. You'll remember that a draft of the study was released and a full presentation was given to the board on November 14th, and public comment was subsequently received during that time. However, suddenly last night, and for the first time, Foothill Conservancy and the Calaveras Planning Coalition submitted a letter to the district urging it not to adopt the West Point study. That letter is available for review and raises two categories of issues that warrant clarification today. First, the letter makes certain representations regarding the study that are just inaccurate. The letter asserts that the plan proposed for approval today includes a potential expansion of Shadd's Reservoir and the potential construction of the Forest Middle Creek Dam. This statement is just incorrect. I just wanted to point that out. While the Shadd's Reservoir expansion and Forest Creek Middle Fork Reservoir were discussed at length in the 2017 Calaveras County Long-Term Water Needs Study and were included in summary detail in this plan, these potential improvements for storage were deemed long-term improvements and were not fully evaluated or recommended as part of this study. Further, to that point, page 54, the last paragraph of this study, the final draft of the 2018 Supplemental West Point Water System Master Plan, states as follows. While the expansion of Shadd's Reservoir and the construction of a new Forest Creek Middle Fork Reservoir are long-term improvements that will not be considered in the shorter-term West Point Water System Master Plan, these future water storage improvements do provide solutions for meeting the long-term water needs of Calaveras County. So they were included in the plan just at a very descriptive level. They were not considered as part of the evaluation for this study. So this plan just is summarily focused on the yet-to-be-completed projects identified in the district's West Point Water System Improvements Final Feasibility Study Report done by HDR in 2004, which included recommended water supply, storage, and distribution improvements for the West Point service area. These elements were also incorporated into the 2005 West Point Water System Master Plan in 2005, which is the last time the Water System Master Plan was updated. This plan intends to prioritize, as I mentioned in my study, my presentation, and advance the recommendations of some of those improvements previously included in that plan update. So there is one item that was evaluated in the update that was not included in the prior plan, and that was the construction of the additional West Point water treatment facilities, a new filter, and that was came up over time as a regulatory requirement and was added on at the request of the engineering staff here. So secondarily, the letter also asserts the West Point study is subject to the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, and cannot be adopted today. This point is incorrect, and I have a number of reasons that I would like to outline for that. First, the district considered whether CEQA would apply. However, the plan does not meet the definition of a project under CEQA. The study does not bind or commit the district to any course of action. It is just a feasibility study and nothing more, and so CEQA is not required. Second, the district may later approve, modify, or simply decline to pursue any component of the document. Third, as a practical matter, any CEQA impacts would be entirely speculative, and therefore CEQA analysis at this point would not provide meaningful information for environmental assessment. And fourth, if the district ultimately elects to undertake the concept discussed in this study, further board approvals would be required, and those approvals will require CEQA. Thus, Foothill Conservancy and the Calaveras Planning Coalition and any other group or member of the public will have an opportunity to comment and object to any project that the district may take in the future. If any future actions are considered by the district, we will, as we have always done in the past, work with regional interests, including individuals and groups. We will conduct agency business in an open, transparent fashion, and will conduct active outreach when any projects are considered for approval by the board. And at this point, my recommendation is to adopt the 2018 Supplemental West Point Water System Master Plan Update and direct staff to submit the report to the State Water Resource Control Board in their request for information related to permit 15452 at Bear Creek.
So moved.
So,
I'll make that motion.
Yeah. And so, at this point, I can take any questions you have on this plan.
You want to second that, and then we'll have some discussion?
Not yet.
Not yet? Okay. All right. So the motion dies for a lack of a second.
Not necessarily. It
Is this for holding it? Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
we're still on the same, we haven't changed, gone to a new agenda item, we're still there. Let me clarify what I'm trying to accomplish here is, I'd like, we've heard a lot about this. We've had this presentation given to us. This draft has been in front of us for a couple months now, over a couple months. We've had a long presentation prior to this. This is the final. It's been on our website since November. There are members of the public here who didn't know about it, I don't think, until yesterday for some reason or another. And if it's okay, I'd like to hear, in addition to the letter, which we got a little bit of explanation from Peter to kind of clarify a few things, and I think there is some misunderstanding on a couple of these items, including shads and CEQA and whatnot. And I would like to hear, if it's through your authority, Mr. President, some public comment on this item before we.
Okay. All right. I think that's worthwhile. I just want to mention that I did get a call at about 11:30 from a young lady that lives up in Wilseyville that had the impression that we were going to make some decisions today, that we're going to put the shovels in the ground and
No, and I don't think we have any projects,
No.
projects here, or bringing projects forward. It's just it's a plan and a study that has been taking place, it has been ongoing for quite a while now. And it is time to approve this plan, most likely. But I do want to give the opportunity to hear from our members of the public who have sat through quite a bunch of boring financial stuff and grant stuff, and to get to this. And so I think it's a courtesy just to see where we're at before moving forward.
Well, they'll have that chance also if it's seconded. Right?
Right,
I mean,
yeah.
that's the
Okay,
way,
well,
really,
okay,
really what you're supposed to do.
Okay, we'll go
Is to
ahead and-
actually have it on the floor
It's-
to discuss, otherwise they
Okay.
shouldn't have a chance to.
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to send this forward with our approval. I'd like to ask for public comments on this item at this time.
So you guys just approved it without?
No.
We haven't voted on
I haven't
it.
voted on anything.
The agenda item's still
I'm-
in front of.
I'm asking for public comments on this. Do you have questions about what the nature of this report is all about? Or this study?
Good afternoon, for President and Directors. My name's Ruben Childress. I'm a District 2 resident. I'm sure most of you know me from my previous work with the Foothill Conservancy, but I don't work for them anymore, so I'm just here as a resident of West Point. I hadn't been aware of the district's work on a long-term watershed plan until last night, yesterday, when I got an email from the Foothill Conservancy.
So I'm looking forward to reviewing the plan. I know that the district has worked hard and done a lot of improvements in the West Point area that I'm sure all the residents are very grateful for. I'm personally on a well, so it doesn't affect me as much. But I'm here also because I'm sensitive to the issue of a dam in the Middle Fork, Forest Creek area. That area is one of the last remaining holdouts of really old growth trees, unless you go to big trees. Some of those creek drainages are the last remaining vestiges of old growth in Calaveras County, where the loggers in the 1800s weren't able to get to because the trees were down in these steeper drainages, and therefore there are still trees that are 10 feet plus in diameter down there. So a reservoir down there scares me from a lot of different perspectives, and I know that East Bay Mud pursued this idea in the past and left it out of their planning for a number of different reasons. And so seeing it in a plan for this district is somewhat alarming, and I just would like to learn more about it. I'm also curious, there's a new District 2 director here who's not here today for this vote, and I think it would make sense to have her weigh in publicly on this, since that is her district. And so those are questions that I would ask that the board consider. I would like to review this plan more, or at least have more time to review it as a District 2 resident. Thank you.
We did have a public comment period. How long was it?
Well, we presented this to your board on November 14th. The current director at that time was Director Strange. He did want to have a lot of input on this study, so we did get it in there before his term had ended. And he did provide comment during that time as well, and there were some changes that were made.
How long was the comment period that we?
I mean, so it's been on the website for, several weeks or months at this point.
I think you said it went up in November.
Right, so the draft plan, but there was some changes made.
So like sticking something on the website is different than notifying a bunch of people to go look at it, but.
It was included in the board package.
Just curious.
In its entirety.
If there was any outreach in District 2 or public engagement to talk to members of the public.
I just want to highlight that this is an engineering study. This is typically done by engineering staff. It was taken on by me because there was not enough staff to work on it. But this is mostly just an update to an existing master plan. From an engineering perspective, utilizing the existing infrastructure, there's really not much in there that's not conceptual, with the exception of pulling over a few pieces from the study that was adopted by this board and Calaveras Public Utilities District's board. So there was some discussion on that, but the majority of the modeling is mostly focused on a 20-year planning horizon. Anything associated with a expansion in shads, or potentially, and I should mention too, Forest Creek Middle Fork Dam was never meant to be the only option. It was just in that long-term water needs study, we recognized that at some point there may be a need for upstream storage, especially for Calaveras Public Utilities District's needs, based upon their growth projections. Those were pushed out very long-term, and so therefore those are not evaluated in the study, even though there is an inclusion.
It's just conceptual.
Yeah, conceptual.
May I ask one more clarifying question?
Just hang on one second. I want to ask Peter a question. That's when you said that there was a long-term planning horizon. That's where the reference to 2,100 came into this study. So we've got, far more in the future than anything that we've discussed in a typical planning horizon.
Yeah, that is correct.
Okay.
And one more clarifying question, sorry, Ruben, there is no projects that are being proposed or pushed forward at this time through this plan?
No, not until the board incorporates a project into its capital improvement program does anything really start to move forward at this point.
So it's all conceptual, that's okay.
Okay, what was your point, Ruben?
Oh, I understand the idea that there are conceptual ideas in a plan to be evaluated in the future. The question I had was, the long-term water needs assessment that you guys put together was based off of 60-year growth projections, if my memory serves, looking out ahead 60 years. And this master plan is trying to address a 20-year planning horizon. So if that reservoir was identified in a 60-year growth projection, it seems odd to include it in the 20-year unless it's explained how it fits. It makes me have questions. Also, I have significant questions about how you can plan 60 years out with accurate data in that way. So a project like this, I think the economics would win out. I don't think it would be affordable to build a small reservoir like that, or the Shad's expansion, 250 acre-feet for the cost that would incur. Seems like it'll probably be a sure answer anyway, but just trying to understand the district's rationale for including those different planning horizons into that plan.
Okay, did you have anything else?
Not right now, no.
Okay. Okay, any other public comments?
Tom Infacino, Calaveras Planning Coalition. Let's start from the other end of this. What is good about the West Point Water System Master Plan? Number one, you are trying to meet short-term needs with efficient options. That's good. Number two, you know that even with all the arguably inflated growth assumptions used in the study, your supply improvements can meet that demand for the next 70 years through 2090. That is good news. Third, a third good thing is that the $19 million, 12,000 acre-foot capacity Forest Creek Middle Fork Reservoir is viewed as a last resort only for meeting a mere 39 acre-foot deficit should a 1976 style drought happen in the year 2100. That is good news, okay? Let's start from there. Okay, what's bad about the master plan? Although we were promised scoping in 2017, we did not get it. Number two, there's no environmental review of the plan. And number three, there seems to be some ambiguous criteria for evaluating projects for consideration in the plan. And let me explain that one a little bit. In 2017, we were told that CCWD did not want to access its Moke River assignment unless the facility was solely owned and operated by CCWD. If in fact the Forest Creek Middle Fork is to be a regional supply project or regional supply alternative, then will it be operated consistently with legally enforceable agreements with other water agencies? Will it not be a solely owned and operated CCWD facility? If that's no longer a deal killer, then we should reconsider using existing salt spring storage and new pipeline to access that state assignment, perhaps before some other county whose initials are SJ figures out how to do it. So where do we go from here? A cornerstone of the Moke-Wise agreement is that stakeholders will work together at the project description and design phase so that projects are designed to be economically, socially, and environmentally acceptable. The West Point plan indicates that design for the Middle Fork pipeline improvements and for the regulatory reservoir improvements and some other improvements that were listed up there will begin shortly, almost immediately after your approval. I would ask you to please contact the Calaveras Planning Coalition and the Foothill Conservancy to participate in that design process. Do not send us a mitigated negative declaration after the fact and expect a good response. In conclusion, on a personal note,
My cousin David passed away over the holidays. David was that cousin who would show up now and then during the holidays in search of a handout with a promise of repayment with interest in the future that nobody ever saw. I fear that the Forest Creek Middle Fork project will be CCWD's Cousin David for the next 70 years. It will pop up now and then, waste your ratepayers' money, and never pay off in the end. Any questions? Really, no questions? Okay.
Okay, I'd like to return to something you said earlier. Read it into the record that at this point, no CEQA review is required.
Yeah, and to clarify the board's action today, I did circulate a revised resolution for your approval today, and that has been made available to the public as well.
Can I address that?
Sure.
Okay. I've been a lawyer for 30 years. I've practiced under the California Environmental Quality Act for 30 years. I've managed to resolve almost all of those issues for my clients in that 30-year period. I've gone to trial on the merits of CEQA cases 5 times, and I've won every one of them. I want you to consider that when you look at, when you evaluate whether the counsel you're getting on CEQA is.
So are you threatening, is your
No,
organization
I'm telling
threatening
you
to
that,
sue us? Is that what
no,
you're
I'm
just
telling you that CEQA is required for a master plan for water infrastructure, the same way that it was
We actually
required
have
for
a
East Bay
counselor here
Mine.
as well, maybe we could ask him.
Are you undefeated in CEQA litigation, sir?
So we have looked at that. We believe it's not required, and we believe it's not it's a feasibility study, and we don't believe CEQA is required. We've discussed that with Peter and looked at that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Come forward, please.
Good afternoon, gentlemen, President, Directors. My name is Susan McMorris. I am the chair of the Blue Mountain Community Renewal Council, and as such also participate in the ACCG quite heavily. My comments are that our project, which is referred to as Friends of Shads Lake, is trying to protect the lake and help the people who own the access to the lake maintain that in a way that is good for our community. And I have a great deal of information from people in West Point. I do live in West Point, as a matter of fact, very, very close to your plant, the treatment plant. And I am sure that the people of West Point are not interested in expanding Shads Lake under these circumstances or building a dam. I am not sure how far the wild and scenic part of the McCollum extends onto the tributaries, because I'm not involved in that side. I'm involved in the community enhancement part of this discussion. But I would like to express that the community would not be very happy about this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I feel comfortable that this study.
Wait, there's another lady. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. My name's Jane Childress. I'm a District 2 resident as well. And I recommend that you don't approve this project without your District 2's director, as well as the other director as well. And I think that the people of West Point need to be informed. They need to be educated on the project. The people in District 2 need to be educated on the project. And because the last director didn't seem to do that, Mr. Strange, I guess his name was, we need some information. we need to study it. And I just want to encourage you not to approve it today. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments?
Back in 2009, East Bay MUB was preparing a long-range management plan that included a project here in Calaveras County. They formed a Citizens Advisory Committee to review that process and participate in the very beginning of that process. That was a good idea. The bad idea was they didn't include anybody from Amador or Calaveras on that Community Advisory Committee. We were very self-righteous in 2009 when they finally came up here to ask our opinion about that project. And we said, how could you possibly have a Citizens Advisory Committee without consulting the two counties where your project is planned? And we were very self-righteous about that. And now, we're prepared, when you're preparing a long-range management plan for West Point, we seem to have done the same thing. We seem to have left the people out of the process. And that's sad. That's what I want to say.
I think the former director from District 2 was thoroughly involved in this.
That's correct. He did provide quite a bit of feedback at times, and he had, his feelings on certain things, especially about Wilson Dam decommissioning and the expansion of the regulating reservoir as opposed to any other water supply projects. I think with regards to those other projects, you work your way back from the supplemental, the 2017 plan for the long-range water resource plan. Those were very quickly eliminated, and it was shown as such in that study from consideration for this plan, and focused strictly on the constraints that are in the existing system. And he agreed with that approach and was consulted on that at times.
That's one person. That's not the community.
Public comment closed.
If there are no further public comments, I'm going to close the public hearing and bring it back to the board. Yes.
Okay.
I just closed the public hearing. I asked for.
You didn't even look up when you had my hand up.
Okay, I apologize. Come forward. Ms. Childress, is that right?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for letting me talk again. I just want to ask, how do you inform the public?
All the meetings are public, everything's agendized.
But not everybody in the community comes to your meetings.
I will tell you, the one person that I think should have been on this shouldn't have sent this letter yesterday.
But I'm
saying, the attorney back here is in the loop, and he never commented until this, the night before.
Nobody's in the loop about this, so the public needs to be informed. But I'm just asking you, how else can you inform the public?
I think, and Rebecca, when you send out the agenda, it goes out to quite a few people.
Online or who?
Email.
Email, yeah, well, if we're not on your email.
Well, you can get on it if you want to.
Can we request that right now? That Tom and as many people from the Foothill Conservancy.
It's hard to believe Foothill Conservancy isn't on that list.
Yeah, I'm doubting that myself.
It's emailed to everybody who's requested an agenda to be directly emailed to them.
But the Foothill
So if
the
whoever
Foothill
would like
Conservancy
to,
isn't the local public. I mean,
so okay, they're on our website, and if anyone is interested, we have meetings the second and fourth Wednesday of every single month. And I'm not here to, I agree. I agree.
Newspaper articles, anything else come out? We don't hear about it.
Does what? I'm sorry.
Newspaper articles, what happens?
We're probably in the news once a month with what's going on and what happened at our.
There was nothing about the West
Joel
Point.
Metzger puts out. We have a Facebook page. Joel can probably talk to this a little bit more, but I know emails go out, our agenda's sent out to anyone and everyone who requests a copy of the agenda, every single meeting and special meetings that are called. So there's a lot of ways to get this information, and if you're interested in what's going on in the water world, visiting the website once a month, and if it had been visited in November or December, this report was on there in a draft set.
Okay.
section
Since
before
November,
that.
has the West Point plan been in any public information, not, including newspapers, not just emails?
I don't know
Has
that I don't know that the West Point
I mean,
master plan
the press
study
isn't here
made the-
today.
Made the news.
The press
And
hardly
that's-
ever shows up to these meetings, you know.
But yeah,
I
you
mean,
can go to the
only time
Enterprise
they
and
come
ask
to meetings
them
if
to
there's gonna be a
report more of
rating
what's
increase.
going on here. If you're talking about the newspaper, but we don't have any control over everything that goes into the
All right.
newspaper.
Thank
But there
you.
are ways to get everything on our agenda and right to your,
Okay.
in your house.
I think it would be very important that the public could be notified of things that are a big impact like this.
There is no
Where
project.
is the
There is no
impact?
project.
Where is, this is a feas,
It's a
this is
decision.
it's a feasibility
To
study.
what, the word project has come up over and over again in your comments and in Tom's comments. There's no project here. This is a study. The projects are listed in the study, but there are no projects being proposed here. That would be a different meeting at a different time and probably make the front page of the paper if a project was proposed, and there would be, and there's a lot of projects we have going on, and a lot of people that they're affected in those neighborhoods. And there's a list of projects in our, list of projects by district in our consent agenda in this packet here today. Listen, every project that's gonna be considered in the next, I think, couple of years.
Well, thank you. I just think you shouldn't approve it unless the public knows more. Thank you.
Thank you.
I can assure you that if this meant that something within this plan was going to be adopted and moved forward as a construction project, there will be public hearings on that. Everybody will be notified about that. Now, this is like checking the boxes that are necessary for us to check, and we try to do that as well as we can. And as far as a suggestion that we should hold off having a vote on approving this, a list of suggestions. It's not an adoption of anything. It's approving a list of suggestions. We're not going to do that. I mean, I will not agree that all of this, the machinations, that's not the right word, but the responsibilities of this board, it takes three people to make a decision, and unfortunately we have a couple of people that, because of unforeseen circumstances, they couldn't be here today. Should we have stopped on every item at the beginning of this thing and said, well, we've only got three people here, so we can't continue here? I'm not going to do that. So anyway, I'm going to give you another 30 seconds.
Suggestions. One, other agencies have a circulation list for all plans and projects. You get on that and you get notified as it starts, not after it's drafted and nearly complete. Second, a lot of other agencies do workshops in the community when they're doing planning for the community. So next time you're doing a plan like this, whether it's in another community, try and have a workshop like that. Would have been good to have a workshop here in West Point in this one. Those are a couple suggestions in the future so people get involved early in this planning process. And just to clarify, a plan, there's some of the confusion here about plans and projects. Under CEQA, the definition, a plan is a project. So I think we're sort of arguing apples and oranges here. Thank you.
Okay.
Good, thank you.
No, we're done. Okay, the public hearing is closed, and we have a motion and a second. Any more comments on this?
No, I do feel, I did want to hear what everyone had to say. I do feel very comfortable that from legal counsel and our water resource manager have talked to us about CEQA being necessary for this plan. I understand that there's some disagreement in the room, but I think that could always possibly be there. I think the solution to the problem about communication is get every agenda, look at it. It's a 2-page document. Get on and see if there's anything on it you're interested. Come by and take a look at it. Then it might direct you to the website. I think that's the best way of communicating of knowing what's going on at CCWD. And so if your name, if you do have an email address and a name, please provide that to Rebecca. She does send that out for every single meeting that we have. I'm very, very confident that the Forest Creek Middle Fork McCallum River Reservoir is not a project on our list, and neither is Shad's Reservoir. At this point in time, this is a plan. Those are deep into the study, and not and I don't think there's any worry about those projects going forward, just because they're mentioned in a plan as a conceptual idea.
Call for the question.
Okay, let's call for the question. Take the roll.
Director Davidson?
Yes.
Director Radaman?
Yes.
President Thomas?
Yes. Okay, that was 5A. We have 5B is an update on the Sustainable Groundwater Management Plan, or the Management Act, excuse me. Peter.
This was a presentation that has been requested by President Thomas, and it's a follow-on to our meetings that we have down in the valley on the first Tuesday of the month, since it allows to educate the board on what's going on at those meetings so that they are informed and have a good understanding of the planning process that is before us at this time. There is a slide here with a project schedule. The proposed submittal of this plan is due at the end of 2019. The proposed public review period is going to start falling in the period of around May or June. As you can see where that star is, we started to move through many of the initial data gathering, which was quite a monumental effort by all the groundwater sustainability agencies in the region. And those are really setting sort of the, the undesirable results which are required by the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, looking at budgets for water supplies and groundwater, and also coming up with the hydrogeologic conceptual model that would be used for the purposes of implementing a groundwater sustainability plan. So there is a separate, as you know, President Thomas sits on a Joint Powers Authority for the purposes of the groundwater sustainability plan development. I actually sit on an advisory committee to that board that is more focused on technical aspects of it. There also is a work group that is made up of members of the public. They've been holding kind of meetings from time to time, and they continue to meet in this month, and also those work group meetings are available online as well. The purpose of that group is mainly just to try to get more information from landowners and folks who may be affected by the implementation of the plan long term. There is going to be a third informational meeting. As we mentioned earlier, there have been promises to host meetings throughout the entire basin for the public to become informed on the groundwater sustainability plan. The third informational meeting, open house, will be held in February. I believe they're targeting February 13th. They don't actually have the specifics of that, but we will post that on our website so that folks are aware locally. We have a Sigma tab on our website right now that is specific to the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act. They just kind of want to remind everyone that the Groundwater Authority is on Facebook, and there's a Facebook page where people get routine updates in the public. Outreach is a huge component of the groundwater sustainability plan being developed in the basin, and a huge part of that budget for that planning effort is dedicated to that. Right now, the advisory committee and the board of directors are focused on looking at projects. There are 31 proposed projects that have been received to date throughout the basin. Most of those are focused on a range of types of actions, including direct groundwater recharge, doing inlet recharge, where you take folks off of groundwater and provide them with surface water supply instead, water recycling projects, thereby reducing the amount of groundwater pumped. Conservation and demand management measures, those are, run the gamut from farming irrigation practices all the way to municipalities. Interbasin transfers, looking at opportunities to take transfer water in, reducing groundwater pumping, and also stormwater use and other technical studies throughout the entire basin. So what the model determined is that there is about 100,000 acre-feet of overdraft. And the idea at this point by the advisory committee is to find a suite of projects that can be fit in to basically affect, basically balance out that continual overdraft. So they are looking at kind of a pathway to the project implementation. Right now they're looking at kind of break them down either into like a regional scale, grouping projects at a GSA level, or sort of a sub-regional scale, or potentially trying to look at it as an entire region, trying to find the best fit. One of the things that's going to be very controversial, they started to have some conversations about this, is where is the funding going to come from? There are not dedicated sources for a lot of these. You look at a lot of agencies, they have ratepayer funds that may not even legally be able to utilize for purposes of supporting projects outside of the area. So there's a lot to be talked about, and we'll get back to you on several occasions over the next few months as that starts to play out. And then the implementation is looking at whether or not those will be, again, split out into projects that are pulled in together across the entire basin, or if it's better to target certain subregions that have a greater need, maybe perhaps a larger cone of depression or areas where water quality issues are present. So the advisory committee recently developed a series of 6 assessment criteria, and the projects were sort of scored against that criteria, and each GSA kind of met individually, and the ones that proposed projects were kind of given an opportunity to look at how those would be scored. Those criteria were mostly looked at from a suite of kind of different potential effects on the basin, including, and then also the implementability of those. Proximity, location to the area where overdraft was considered, sort of the cost per volume. Obviously cost always comes up a lot, but maybe that's not necessarily the most important thing when it comes to selecting a project. One of the things that Sustainable Groundwater Management Act requires is that you do look at disadvantaged communities and see if there are benefits, there's a desire to affect those communities, and then also environmental benefits and water quality impacts, trying to affect those as well. So there was a workshop held to identify sort of the basin priorities and try to group these into a portfolio or a suite of projects. Feedback was used to try to identify those sort of themes for those portfolios, and those projects were evaluated and compared to try to pull together a suite of projects. So the next steps for the board of directors at the Joint Powers Authority meeting next month will be to start to look at ways to optimize those portfolios and look at a suite of projects. Do you go with a bunch of small projects? Do you try to find some very large projects and maybe invest in those from a regional scale? Those are decisions that are going to be made pretty shortly.
When the Joint Powers Board is looking at that, are they going to be, it seems to me that their decision is going to be based upon the recommendations of your technical advisory committee, right?
Right.
Okay. I think you should point out, or we should point out, that our GSA, we don't have any, we are not listed among those 34 projects that you mentioned. We didn't, we have a kind of a different, we're operating under different circumstances, I guess you might say, compared to the guys where they're actually on a lot of groundwater pumping. We are not. But what also we need to clarify is that the 34 projects, not all of them, maybe none of them will be done, and we've got 20 years to come up with additional projects. I mean, if we can find a way that we can draft an affordable project that does result in groundwater recharge, then we have the opportunity to do that over the next 20 years. And I've started writing one, so.
Yeah, that is correct, President Thomas. And also, I did want to note that one of the things that they did want to stress was that these had to be projects that were going to be implemented or, in that time frame. Unfortunately, like you said, groundwater is not something that we rely upon heavily in this county for large municipal users. Therefore, we haven't necessarily seen the issues or tried to implement large-scale projects. I mean, things like maybe taking Valley Springs PUD off of groundwater and putting them on surface water, those are possible projects that we've looked at in the past, but I don't know that they're going to make a significant impact, for the entirety of the basin.
Speaking about Valley Springs PUD, any feedback from the consultants on that?
I have notified the consultants that they should continue to reach out to those folks, and at times I have offered in the past to provide their board with a briefing. Was not given that opportunity, but we'll continue to try to find a way to make sure that they are aware that this planning effort is going on and that it will have potential to impact their operations.
Okay. You want to touch on what they told, or what the consultant told you at that last technical advisory committee about how you can achieve this balance in the groundwater level?
Yeah, one of the things that was brought up, which was kind of not unexpected, is the consultants started to talk about funding projects and how they're going to be funded. There's always opportunities. Obviously, groundwater sustainability agencies under, I think it's Prop 26, are allowed to leverage fees on landowners and things like that, which is not popular. But there's two options here. You can implement projects, you can join into a regional approach, or you can potentially look at your own GSA, come up with your own budget, and figure out on your own how you're going to meet that. So that could be a matter of just saying everybody's going to reduce. But essentially what they've decided is that it's about a 10% reduction in total pumping across the entire basin. So either one way or the other, you're going to have to figure it out, whether you join in and pay into projects or you go at it alone, just at a small GSA scale and not necessarily across the entire region. But there's more to come on that. I think that there was some people that became immediately very concerned, especially those that have been participating who take no groundwater. We have Wallace Lake Estates, that's it. For our purposes, it'd be very easy to find a 10% reduction there, but that does nothing for the entire region in Calaveras County, so.
Is Wallace even in the eastern San Joaquin Basin?
It is.
Right on the edge of it, or?
Right, so it's a pumper out of that part of the basin.
Isn't there a pipeline that goes out of the reservoir over to those wells? No, I'm sorry, I'm not supposed to say that.
So just to give you an update, there was some funding that became available from DWR for technical services to establish additional technical needs for the basin. One of the things that they looked at was providing funding to construct monitoring wells in areas where they know that data gaps exist. They looked at the model, figured out the best areas, and targeted 3. There's a total of 11 wells that have been proposed, but they've looked at the ones that are the highest priority. And in the November meeting, they identified 3 monitoring well locations that could be applied for a grant, which should have a very high success rate. The high priority basins do get kind of kicked to the top of the list. Those wells are focused mainly on trying to find groundwater dependent ecosystems, which is required as part of this plan. So some of those are near rivers and areas that are under the influence of groundwater and support various beneficial uses and wildlife. Those include areas here within our portion of the basin in the east side GSA. President Thomas did reach out to some landowners in Stanislaus County that he knew to try to see if they wanted to allow for access to their property to put a well in, and He was
How'd that go?
swiftly removed.
Not well. To
But
coin a phrase, not well.
But the county has some sites in San Joaquin County, and they will continue to look at landowners in Stanislaus County that could potentially participate.
It's kind of confusing, Calaveras/Highway 88, where do they come together?
So, sorry, that's the Calaveras River.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
on Highway 88, I think, yeah. So.
We're expanding.
Steel and highway.
And that's all I got. This is just part of our continued outreach as required and making sure that, so I do routinely update the website. There is a dedicated tab where this information is put up, trying to support the outreach effort that's going on by the larger Joint Powers Authority for folks. And so it's hosted here on our website as well. So.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay, item number 6, General Manager Report.
Yes, Mr. President, I just have 2 items. One is some correspondence we received last week from Aqua JPIA congratulating the district on having winning a President's Award for President's Special Recognition Award for having a loss ratio of 20% or less in its property program, its liability program, and its workers' comp program. So we received award certificates in all 3 programs, which is very good, and Director Radaman will understand that.
Thank you.
And this is also for Director Radaman, a recap of or an update of our customer assistance program. All 200 ALEC slots for the water customer assistance program have been filled. We are at 112 on the sewer side. And at the next meeting in February 13th, we'll report back and also give you a summarization of all the costs for implementing this program.
And we do need a count as of this January 31st.
I will make sure we have a final count.
It's about lunch money.
Yes, I understand. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, we have the board reports, starting with Director Radaman.
Okay, I just got one thing to report. The Mountain County Water Resources Association meeting is tomorrow. I'm sorry, Friday, the 25th. It's going to be, we rotate that around. It's every 2 months, so we rotate it around from district to district, from Placer County to El Dorado County to Amador. We host it here once in September. We'll be TUD in Tuolumne County. We'll be hosting it on Friday at 10:30 if anyone is interested. And that's all I have. Thank you.
I have nothing to report.
You're not going to go to that meeting?
What meeting?
The Mountain County's board
I wasn't
meeting.
even listed.
Oh, and just to encourage attendance, we are having turkey sandwiches for lunch. I'm sure some chips and soda.
Did you say you have nothing to report?
Yeah.
Okay.
Still didn't.
Nothing that you guys don't already know.
Well, I'm pleased to report that Director Underhill and I went to the Tuolumne Utilities District Board meeting yesterday, and it was a very positive feeling. The reception that we had over there was really quite remarkable. They made us feel very welcome, and I don't know, they just really have expressed their desire to continue to work on a regional basis, and they see the benefit of that. And so anyway, it was I didn't know exactly how we would be received, but it was very gratifying. So, and they have a good looks like that they've got a board that has a good rapport, and they appear to even like each other. It's quite a concept. You smiled for the first time. The first time this year.
It's gonna crack. Unlike here.
No, I feel very lucky that we have a board that seems to like each other too. That's all I have to report. Okay, we have no future agenda items. Anybody want to discuss? Okay, the next board meetings will be on Wednesday, February the 13th at 1 PM right here, and also Wednesday, February 27th at 1 PM right here. Now, we're going into a closed session. 9A is a conference with legal counsel about existing litigation under Government Code number 54956.9A, La Contenta Investors Limited versus CCWD. And I have to read the court docket number? Okay. Okay, all right, 9A, we talked about that one, 9B, but I was having so much fun. And we have a 9C. And we will be back if we have, or we will be back to report. No public comments. Okay, let's go into closed session.
And Rebecca, if you could make note, I won't be here on February 27th.
Okay.